we'll get started if it's okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Thrust stage in Meiley-Swallow Hall on the campus of North Central College for a very special evening with one of our own, one of our dear alumna. I want to make the point that we put bios of everybody in the little programs that you have so that we can jump right into the conversation. We don't have to spend any time doing bios. And for the folks watching on YouTube, we'll make sure to put those in the make sure to put those in the show notes. I want to start by asking Rima to tell a little bit about her story. She's told this story so many times, but we haven't all heard it. I mean, even just before this event, she did a television interview, and I know some of it's going to feel like a repeat just in a few moments, but lots of people with a new audience. I remember, Rima, when you were with us, you graduated in 2000, so you were here 2008 to 2012, roughly? Because you liked it at North Central College so much.
Totally.
That's the answer.
Absolutely. That was absolutely it.
The check's in the mail. The check's in the mail. That's right. That's better than any donation you can give to the Alumni Association. Say it louder for the people in the back. But I remember when you were here that you were deeply interested in politics and government, of course, and you were also committed to the study, preservation, and celebration of Lithuanian culture. Especially through dance. It's an important part of your identity, the community in which you interact. So tell us a little bit about what you did after graduation and then how your interests and backgrounds, plural, sustained your passions and then how you got to your current path.
Absolutely. So after graduation in 2012, I led a pretty normal life, but I've always been a volunteer. So I was a Rotarian. I did a lot of food pantry volunteering, like the norm. Helping people was kind of like a baseline. It was something that like we learned as kids to do. And so like we did it at church, we did it through like any sort of like the Kiwanis Pancake Day, anything we could volunteer at, we did. So I still did that after graduation. I did that during college and I did it after. And to be fair, I did actually really love the political science and philosophy department, which is why I stayed 2 extra years, because I really, really wanted both of those degrees really bad. So I was like, I'm not leaving until I have both of those majors. So that was really what it was. And I had 2 minors too, so I did pretty good. But I still don't sleep, in case anybody was wondering. I don't sleep. 2 years after I graduated was when Russia invaded Crimea. And so my political science background, as well as my heritage, being Lithuanian and being the descendant of war refugees that lost their land to Russia, I had already like the foundation anyway. In college, I studied Russian imperialistic tactics. I did a couple papers on Lithuanian dissident movements, the peaceful revolution against Russian occupation and stuff like that. So like I had the baseline. And at that time, nobody was going to Ukraine yet. Like Ukrainians were going, but like foreign volunteers were not going yet. So instead, the Lithuanian community, myself, and the Ukrainian community, we got together and we were going to Washington, D.C. We were talking to congressional officials. We were also talking to congressional staff about why it's important that we keep Ukraine safe and why this invasion is the foundation or the pathway of what could happen, which was eventually full-scale invasion. So we did that. I did protests in Chicago. We went back to D.C. several times in between 2014 and 2022. So I was working in private finance, and when just a normal office job, right? Every day, downtown Chicago, the rat race, whatever. And when February happened in 2022, and I'd been watching the political chatter on Twitter for a while, and myself and the other Ukrainians that I had been doing the DC work with, the advocacy work in DC, we were like, it's not really gonna happen, is it? And then it did. And so 3 days later, I was already in a Ukrainian business loading pallets full of humanitarian aid, sorting through food, sorting through clothes, sorting through everything. And that was my life until May of 2022, when the opportunity to be the managing director for Blue Yellow USA came up. I took that job. I quit my job in finance, left that all behind, and took this job at this nonprofit that is still running, They're one of the only ones that are still sending pallets of medical supplies and checked luggage worth of supplies to Ukraine. Make it real easy. We love them. They're local, Naperville. But they help us get our stuff over. But I ran that for a year. And I went to Ukraine for the first time in September of 2022. And I needed to see what was happening on the ground for myself. There was a lot of skepticism at the time in Washington from certain parties that were problematic, and I really wanted to dispel those rumors by saying, hey, I'm an American, I put my 2 feet on Ukrainian soil, and I can tell you exactly that this is real, and it's not fake, and it's not a video game, and it's not a psyop, it's real. So we did that. I went back and forth to Ukraine, bringing in medical and non-lethal military aid until about the spring of 23. Did other volunteer work in Ukraine after leaving Blue Yellow USA, and then I was informed of the shortage of medics, and there was an offer for me to get trained up as a combat medic and certified, I have certificates, to become a combat medic. And I took up that offer without hesitation. I said, okay, let's do it. And so I started at level 1, level 2, and finally combat corpsman level 3. I now also have training as a nurse. I'm a hybrid combat medic nurse. And I taught as a certified instructor for tactical medicine for 8 months before I was recruited by the Foreign Legion, and then I enlisted in the Army for real in January of last year. No regrets. I'd still do it all over again the same way. So.
Thank you so much. One of the things, as we structured this discussion, we thought it was, you have a political scientist and a physician in conversation with you. And so I'm going to ask Dean Groll I know she has a lot of questions about the medical side. So we'll sort of take turns going back and forth and weaving these in to only the type of narrative that a good liberal arts college can do.
Of course.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Dean Groll, please.
Okay. Rima, there are so many pathways to healthcare, and if you can help us understand, maybe from your perspective and your training, what's the difference between tactical combat medicine and, say, emergency medical services?
Okay, so first, we have a very abbreviated curriculum. Normally, and we're teaching off of the U.S. military tactical combat casualty care curriculum. It's the exact same, complete copy. But they have 16 weeks to become a corpsman. I had 9 days. So we have pass-fail, so it's written exam and practical, so you have to learn it. There is no other option, but we're in an active war scenario. So, and tactical medicine is all about battlefield frontline work where you have to rely on your unit members to be able to save you in a scenario that, you have to wait for doc to get to you. So everybody has to have the right training, right? It differs in Ukraine because we don't have air support. We don't have most of the medical supplies that we need. We are dependent on outside donations. So we're working in a very austere environment. So whereas EMS has much longer curriculums, and while the mechanism is still the same, you still have to stop the bleed. It's done differently because you have all of the resources at your fingertips. Your rig is fully stocked. Your hospital is maximum 30 minutes away in non-rural environments. Let me be really clear. But you still have a fully stocked rig, and your training is much more rigorous. It's not to say that ours isn't, it's just shorter. We get this much. Y'all get this much in EMS. So you have to be really highly motivated to want to be a combat medic in Ukraine. I did it the hard way. Like, American military, like I said, they get 16 weeks, if not longer. Like 18 Deltas have different training, 68 Whiskeys have different training. But I also say if you love medicine, it doesn't matter. So.
And from your experience caring for soldiers and civilians, what would be one of the takeaways from your approach to patient care that might be different from a combat medic?
From an EMS standpoint, might be different from EMS?
Yeah.
Okay, so patient care, regardless of where you are, largely remains the same. You still have to be there for somebody on their worst day. We might have a little bit less to work with, but we try to do everything within the power of our abilities to make sure that that person is still supported emotionally, as well as doing the life-saving procedures as well. Patient care also starts with having an empathetic heart. Like, you have to be able to go outside of yourself and put your own pain, your own stigma, your own issues outside of what you're doing to be there for someone that just lost their legs. Okay? So if that also means that they have to crush your fingers while you change their bandages because they're in a lot of pain, I didn't need my fingers anyway. That's my mentality. I could fix that later. So.
And thank you, Rima.
No problem.
And if you could teach one lesson to future healthcare providers or faculty based on your experience in combat, what would that be? Master
your basics. Everybody wants to do the high speed, operator, medical skills like, a cricothyroidotomy. I promise you, you never ever want to do that in real life. Learn your basics, because at the foundation, if you don't know your basics, you're not going to know your high acuity, low occurrence skills either. Mastering your basics gives you that foundation you need in order to save a life. And it's almost always that you'll use your basics more than you use your advanced skills. So know your basics, master them.
I want you to have a moment to talk to us about how it's going. You'll remember the political society, the political communication concept of agenda setting in the media, right? This is Chantal Iyengar's idea that the media don't necessarily tell us what to think, but they do tell us what to think about. In other words, the exposure that we have to certain stories, to certain topics, is what we think. That's what we think about. That's what we talk to our neighbors about. That's what we engage about on social media, et cetera. And I know that you have an understandable frustration that the war in Ukraine has fallen off because of so much else that's happening in the United States. So as an American, it's really important for you to be able to tell us how it's going. What is the reality of what's happening in the war? The perception is that it's not raging the way it was. That's not true, is it?
No, and I think the biggest misconception is that because it's not being reported on, it's slowed down, nothing's happening. That is absolutely not true. We have 1,000 kilometers of front line that are still active. The war is still raging constantly. There is a lot of technological advancement in modern warfare that they're not talking about. The drone swarms, assaults, the many missiles and rockets and Shahed drones that they are firing, not just on military, but on civilians as well. And it is a daily occurrence. But because the media doesn't talk about it anymore, and people don't know the independent news medias that are out there that are available to you in the English language, you don't know what's happening. It's like a reverse Iron Curtain. It's just like we have the wool is draped over everyone's eyes because the 24-hour news cycle is focused on the next ridiculous thing that is happening that may not even be anywhere near as important. But the news media,
ballrooms and so forth.
Mainstream news media likes to find the next sexiest topic, and everybody is apparently tired of reporting on families being bombed and children being killed. I don't know why, but it's still actively happening. So we have news outlets like United 24 that report in English. We have Kyiv Independent. We have Kyiv Post. All of these news outlets are in English. So you have the ability to inform yourself, but if you don't know where to look, that's the problem. Or my social media forwards all of this stuff everywhere, because there is, if I'm not talking about it, or if somebody else that is not English speaking is talking about it, people don't know. So we're trying as much as we can to say, hey, we're still here, nothing's changed. In fact, it's gotten harder, and civilians being bombed is a nightly occurrence.
Yeah, Elizabeth Mueller has that this concept of compassion fatigue. And the argument is that, right, that we as humans, we can only absorb so much information about suffering before we shut down. And sort of the media, because they're encouraged to give us what we want, not necessarily what we need, because we have a for-profit media system in the United States. That's certainly driving a lot of it. We know it's happening in the Sudan as well, right? So much is happening there. No one's thinking about Sudan as well. So this was predictable, I think, to get to that point. What is it like as an American there? Like, what do folks think about Americans? How do they interact with you, knowing that you're an American? Are you sort of a unicorn to them because you're an American, but you seem to care more than other Americans care about what's going on? Are they still hopeful that Americans are on their side and behind them? what's the thought about America?
I mean, obviously, they know that the people are behind them, and that's something that I try to impart constantly. We had in Michigan a full ballroom, stacked house of Americans that were practically breaking the door down to try and support Ukraine. So we know that the people are with us, right? I'm a unicorn to them, not because I'm American, but because I'm a foreigner that could leave and I don't. And I serve with them, alongside them, go in the same dangerous situations, and I am not beholden to my contract because I'm not a Ukrainian. I am a foreigner. I can leave whenever I want to. And
Mandatory service for Ukrainians?
yes. Now there is conscription. Yeah, absolutely. In an active war situation. But I've had many Ukrainians, they're like, you could just leave and you don't. I'm like, no, mission's not done yet. Where would I go? I'm still working, So that's, I think, more for them. That's a surprise, but I'm also female and small. And so they're like, and I go further forward than some of the men do. So they're like, cool, so that's, that's more of the thing that I've had that question many times when we were at the Special Operations Medical Conference. There were myself and my commanders were with me, and one of the foreigners came up to us and asked us what we do, and that we're combat medics or surgeons that go far forward, and the gentleman looks at us and points at me and goes, even you? And my surgical counterpart was like, she goes further forward than we do. And I'm like, what do you mean? So that's more of what we deal with. But they know I think there are questions, obviously, about what happens on the administration level that I just can't answer. I wish I could, but I can't. And they understand that that's separate from the American people. So I think
but even that's a level of sophistication that I think most Americans don't hold.
Yes.
Right? I remember, all the years during the Iraq War, the question, and even now in Iran, why don't they just rise up? Why don't they just, they have a lack of understanding or lack of appreciation that the populace might have en masse a different thought, even in a democracy, right? A flawed democracy, but a democracy, that they could have different ideas than the leaders. That's something that we typically don't we don't allow ourselves to believe that about other countries, but yet there's a sophistication enough among Ukrainians to say, we understand that what's happening with the government in the United States may not reflect the feelings of the people of the United States.
At least the ones that are around me, and I mean,
the other ones run away from you. They don't want to be anywhere near. Anybody who feels differently, they're trying to stay away from you, maybe.
Yeah.
It's not a random sample.
Yeah, you never know.
Great.
Yep.
Mary, you were going to...
Yeah, I can't imagine, Rima, the things that you've seen and the patients you've cared for and the complex trauma. If you can comment on the well-being of the troops, of yourself, of your patients, as this continues on, how are things and what kind of care are they getting for PTSD, potential complex PTSD?
So this is a developing program. It's obviously not something that was super well in place. I just don't think they were ready for it. And obviously with older systems, they don't have always the most recently trained mental health professionals. So that's changing. We have a lot more now resource-wise than we did before for mental health for soldiers. And it's something we pay pretty close attention to. Like, morale is really important. I think everyone really does run on hope, and also because you can't stop. Stopping means defeat. So we keep going in spite of being exhausted because there is no alternative. That's also why I always find it interesting when everybody's like, oh my God, Ukrainians are so resilient. Was there another option? Was there a choice? And that's also I think it's half resilience, half survival mode, because there's no alternative. But I pay very close attention to my soldiers and how they're doing, and also just asking questions, usually are you doing okay? Have you had any food? Are you drinking enough water? The normal stuff that they're supposed to talk to us about. And that's, I think, the main thing is watching out for each other and, checking each other if we're not doing okay, keeping an eye on each other. So that's kind of where, it's the brother sisterhood, you know what I mean? So you got to look out for each other as much as possible.
Rima, a minute ago, I didn't want to interrupt you because you were rolling, but you had mentioned that there was targeting of civilians. That's a war crime.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Right. So talk us through. I mean, it's there are rules of war.
Yeah, there's
Right? There are rules
engagement.
of war.
Yep.
And there are, from what you're saying, and from what we hear in other areas as well, regular violations of those rules. How does, from a military standpoint, what's the mindset of responding to that? Because I can imagine that there must be some indication or some compulsion to respond in kind. But from most of the reports that I've seen, the Ukrainians have not done that.
They won't.
They have not done that.
No.
So does it feel like it's an unfair advantage then, as one side's playing by the rules and the other side's not?
Of course, but I think if we reduce ourselves to the lowest common denominator, we're no better than they are. And that's something that we've had discussions over. We've had, stories of POWs that were captured, and they asked, the Ukrainian soldiers, "You're not going to kill us?" And the Ukrainian soldiers said, "No, we are not you. We will not do this to you." And I've also treated POWs myself as part of our assigned work, because the reminder is those POWs get exchanged for our guys. So they need to survive, and they need to be treated enough to be healthy so that we can bring home our own. And that's really important. But Russia goes beyond that, even from the military standpoint. They're going after civilians. They bombed a children's hospital. They bombed a maternity ward. I was there when they bombed the children's hospital in Kyiv. It was a mile from my apartment at the time. So imagine like this scenario where there are kids with cancer, other major health problems, and they're being targeted by Shahed drones. Like, it's a normal and common occurrence, and Russia does not care. And so what we end up doing is we have a war crimes tribunal unit that goes around documenting every single war crime. The anthologies are enormous, but we will not respond that way. That's not how we operate.
I mean, I imagine NGOs like Amnesty International, they're keeping an eye
Sure.
on these sorts of things as well. So
Yeah.
there's multiple validations of these kind of atrocities, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk just a moment, a little bit lighter, but about the liberal arts.
Okay.
You are a product of the liberal. You're also a product of your mama,
Yes.
yeah, who's joining us in the theater today. We're so glad to have her. And I know that was a very important part of your development, but you spent the better part of a decade in college. I did not remember that. Can you think back a little bit on your time here? This is not fishing for compliments for any North Central folks, but just the focus on the liberal arts, on communication, critical thinking, historical grounding. There's a lot of talk in the atmosphere now about the value of education, and it's usually focused on job training. So there's conversations about AI, and there's conversations about return on investment and student loan debt. What is it about what you got while you were with us that has taken you through first your finance career, right? You didn't get a finance degree, but you got a really good job in finance, and then on to other things. What is it about a liberal education that you found so important?
I think there's many parts to this, but also, especially as a political science major, you are molded by your professors, and especially when they're civic duty driven, that does trickle down to your students. And also the way that you perceive education and the way that you talk about education and the way that you help your students grow is really important. That's probably the biggest driver. The finance thing, that was a sales job, but I was able to be really good with people because we had so many presentations in college that I was like, I still have to talk in front of everybody, so I got to talk to somebody. So that was fine. I once had a professor say to me, "I think you're only staying in college another 2 years because you're afraid to be out in the real world." And I think it's safe to say I'm not afraid of much.
Was that me? Was that me? Was it me that I said
It
that?
was you.
It sounds like something I might have said, so I wanted to make sure that we get it on the record.
But I loved being in the political science program, and it truly was that. And also, Dr. Fisher, who's not here, was one of the biggest professors that I had that molded me in my philosophical thinking. And he made
Dr. David Fisher,
Yes.
Professor of Philosophy Emeritus. Yeah.
miss that guy. He really helped me put all those big thoughts and ideas into a more concise way of thinking about trying to help the world on a greater scale for the greater good, and that helped me. That was the way that I framed so much of my thinking, is that to think outward, give more of yourself, leave the world, continue to make the world a better place than when you found it. And all of that happened at North Central to at least get me rolling that way. I think in terms of just like fear and all that, you always operate at the level of risk you're willing to take. What can you tolerate? And if you don't see things that will jumpstart that thinking of, I can do this, or hey, this is really scary, but I can do it, you're not going to leave your comfort zone. Again, this looks different for everybody. You don't have to go join a war zone like me, but doing the right thing looks different for everybody. And North Central helped me understand where is the right thing leading me. And that also was part of the political science program. All of the different things that I learned through the different classes that I took helped me get to where I was.
I mean, I went to college in 1989 and I haven't left. So who's afraid? So who's afraid of the real world?
Yeah, but you're shaping young minds. So there's one way of, that's the best answer I could give you.
Rima, I wanted to go back to your statement about caring for POWs.
Yes, ma'am.
I think there's so much that our students can learn for the moral obligation of caring for human life. Any insights that you might have, or a memory of a patient that you cared for that was from the opposing side?
I went into that with a very blank mind. Maybe that is biased because of what I've watched happen to my people that I care about. But I have to go into it with a blank mind and extremely numb and view it as a living organism that I have to keep alive as part of my duties as a medic. And that's it. Because I think it's a war, and you can only separate things so much. It's part of my job. In this moment of what I have done, it was just to check them, make sure that they were well enough for transport, prescribe or tell their handlers what was needed to be done, and make sure they were healthy to get to the next step. But you really have, from an emotional standpoint, you really have to lock it up, because it's extremely hard to not place blame, even if that person was not holding the controller or the trigger. So that's the hard part. And also personal bias aside as well. You have to keep your inner hatred to yourself, because that's still a living person that you still have to make sure it gets to the next level so yours can come back in the prisoner exchange.
Is there conscription on the Russian side too?
Conscription?
Yeah.
Probably.
Do you know?
I
Well,
don't
because
know.
I was just thinking about, as you're dealing with somebody there, they may not have wanted to make that choice as well. I mean, you're sort of
Exactly.
in that same situation.
Well,
right?
and again, like this is a can of worms conversation, but like it's hard. You have to set your personal biases aside. It's not easy, and not everyone can do it, but if it's the orders that we have from our command, we are going to do it.
Maybe another question or two, and then we know we have folks in the audience that want to ask questions. Dr. Amalis has some expertise here that I hope he's excited to interject into this conversation. So we'll open it up to the audience in just a moment. But I'm thinking about, in the 4 years of 4.5 years that this particular war has been going on, there's been a lot of technological advances in the world. Have you seen that? Have you seen application of some of those technologies in your work? Are there efficiencies that you're able to leverage, or is that very much constrained by infrastructure and the sort of circumstances of war?
In the defense side of it, that application is going very well.
For sure. I was thinking more the medical side, but yes.
We are
okay.
operating in a very austere manner. One of the nicer things that we've seen is we've had more portable ultrasounds, so we can give more ultrasound training to our combat medics to detect internal bleeding faster. That's been one, but like in terms of like any sort of automated systems, no, we just don't have the resources or the budget for that. I know there are ground robots that are doing extractions right now, but we don't have it in our particular section. It's just a cost issue. And also the drone swarms from the Russian side are so heavy that I'm not even sure we could really get them out safely. We cannot do extractions right now because of the intense drone barrages from the Russian side. So they target our medical vehicles, and they will target us on the way in and on the way out. So we can't actually, it's been a big struggle to get guys out. We have to wait for certain windows of time. And so like that makes it harder also to have like more technologically advanced things, because if the vehicle is going to get destroyed, all of that gets destroyed with it.
You had specifically mentioned the Shahed drones. And I think for folks know, one of the real challenges there is that these are not very expensive to manufacture. They're not manned, of course.
Shahed drones are made by Iran,
Right.
and
Yes.
they're the big ones.
That's yeah, but they're not. But right, and so but they fly low.
Yeah.
Right, and that, it's very
Into
difficult.
buildings.
Right,
Yeah.
very difficult, and right. So if they lose one, it's not. You know what I mean?
No.
It's not, it doesn't matter, and so that makes it very difficult, right?
Yeah.
To sort of. And we know that there has been recently another meeting between Putin and the Iranians, right? I mean, just last week, and so there certainly is a lot of layers. But if we start there, then nobody else is going to get to ask any questions. So I will not promise that Dr. Groll and I will ask no more questions, but I will open it up to the audience to ask questions if that's okay. Please just say your name and if there's anything else relevant about your identity, and then feel free to ask Rima any questions that you have. Go ahead, Glenn.
My name is Glenn Drover. I was curious, are you attached to a particular unit, or are you loaned out?
I'm
Like at battalion level or somewhere lower than that?
So I'm actually a part of a medical unit. So we're in the Defense Intelligence section of the Army, and we're on the Foreign Legion side. So there's the Ukrainian side, and then there's the foreigners. That's where I'm at. I'm part of a medical unit in our 5th Squadron. I'm also a hybrid medic. So I have done medevac and casevac from a pickup point not far from the front line. I do stabilization point, and I'm also in the military hospital. I do everything except for assault medic. And that puts me in a very unique position to understand the entire section of the chain. So right now, I am Chief Combat Medic and soon to be Sergeant of the 1st Battalion for our 5th Squadron. And I'm in charge of training and also working at the military hospital. I train our guys in order to be able to do my job out there at the front in the zero line. So they're getting CLS training. We're going to start training combat medics very soon. And then I do telemedicine from where I am in case they need help. Yeah.
Are you seeing more foreign fighters fighting on the Russian side?
I have, well, so it depends on the section of the Army that you're in, but of course Russia is actively recruiting foreigners from Africa, from the Latin American countries. So I'm sure you're going to see some of those. I don't see them because I deal with our guys. But I know they're there. That's not a question for me. That's for sure.
So that's a much higher ratio than it was a year ago.
Definitely, 100%.
And you may start seeing them come through as POWs at some point.
Yes.
Right? So as we move forward. Dr. Hamalis, look, your humility precedes you, so I hope that you'll make some reference to your manuscript. Will you please do that?
That's okay.
He does. So this is exactly it.
I thank you so much for being here. First of all, it's great to see you again.
Yeah.
I still remember your Richter project.
Yep. Oh, that was a long time ago.
So I guess I have kind of two questions. One is, as Dr. Caliendo sort of referenced, I mean, I've done some work in this area on like Orthodox Christian perspectives on war, and thinking about, the ethics of war within a broadly Christian framework. And I've had people at different conferences sort of, some soldiers have responded like, yes, everything that I'm reading resonates with my experience, and other people have said, I can't get on board with this having lived now in Ukraine or having experienced what I experienced. So I'm wondering if you have had a chance to kind of reflect on how the direct experience has changed or challenged maybe the perspective, the moral perspective, or the faith perspective for that matter, with which you entered into your role.
That's a tough one. Right. I think in these moments it is particularly difficult to find the presence of God. And that is an internal struggle that I've had for the last 3 years. It's hard to, and I'm not saying that This is not an atheism thing. I just struggle in these moments, especially when I see children that are dead, or mothers, people that are buried in the rubble of buildings that are bombed, or like a guy that just lost both legs in an explosion from the front line. It is very difficult for me to feel the presence of God. And that is an honest answer. It's a struggle. And I struggle with my faith daily. And I think that that's something that a lot of people in the same line of work can say. I also admire those who are very strong in their faith. I admire them for that. And I think it's great that they are able to use their faith as a foundation to keep going. And they believe in that hope. I still have hope, but I always had hope. I'm a very hopeful individual, but there are moments where it's very hard for me.
I'm interested in the degree to which there's faith embedded in the medical training. Like, so for instance, here we have like Catholic hospitals, and we have, you know what I mean? So as the training, is it fully secular, or are there religious elements that sort of come into the
Fully secular. Yeah, and I'm in a military hospital, so like there's none of that. Like that's kept largely out of the hospitals anyway. Like they're just hospitals. There's no like religious aspect to it.
Well, we do healthcare very weirdly here.
Yeah, you know,
it's all privatized
you know,
or whatever.
everybody's different.
We could have a whole nother forum about the way we do healthcare in the United States. And that's
Sure.
one of the reasons why we have not-for-profit, religious-based healthcare systems where you wouldn't have if you had a nationalized healthcare system like the European countries do. That's good. Other questions for Rima? Go ahead.
Confidence comes when you let go of worrying about what other people are going to think of what you do. And there are a lot of people who don't agree with what I'm doing or don't support it. But as long as at the end of the day, you can look in the mirror and see that you are living your most authentic self and your most authentic life, it doesn't matter. And I've had criticism from every corner, you have to stop caring and just go forward. Because I only care about my patients. I only care about my soldiers. That's the most part. But you also have to love yourself. This is going to turn into a therapy session. And that took a very long time. Let me tell you, that took a very long time. But you have to be firm and supportive of who you are as a person. And that doesn't happen overnight. I've been to rock bottom. And not everybody has to do that, but sometimes you really have to hit a very low point before you understand who you are. And adversity brings you strength. It makes you discover who you are. Can you handle it? Can you not handle it? When you're walking through fire, you're getting out. So you need to walk through it. One of my best friends said, the only way out is through. So that's how you have to do it. Self-preservation is not something I think about, but I think it's automatic anyway to a degree. When I'm surrounded by security, if we have to treat POWs, there's always handlers and other people around us. So that's not, and they're secured. They're usually handcuffed, so that's not an issue. I know that there's a lot of risk. I know what I'm doing is not safe. But I also know that if my hands weren't there, or if I wasn't there to teach, maybe some people wouldn't be alive. And I worked with someone who was an incredible individual who also felt the same way and taught with me and was an incredible medic. And he felt the same way. So the only way out is through.
That's beautiful. Yeah, let me quickly, you just to follow up on, you mentioned jokingly a therapy session, but Dr. Groll asked earlier about the well-being of the troops, and I don't think that you said specifically are there mental health professionals available, either while folks are serving in combat or when they're finished? Do you know, like, are there volunteers or are there professionals who are being paid to provide, and not just for soldiers, but for you all caretakers as well?
It's both. So there's organizations, there's nonprofits, there's paid professionals. It just also people have to want to go. That's the military structure and military attitude is it's really hard to push guys into doing if they need help. And we're always trying to work towards that. There's still hurdles in mental health. Like that's something that's always going to be there. I think that's normal for every military structure. There are people who are like, it doesn't work for me. And it's like, well, maybe you just, but it's important to be encouraging and to say, maybe next time you will find a therapist that will work for you. Like, don't blame anyone for anything, but like always encourage them to say, hey, if you need help, come talk to me and we'll find you help. That's number one. So
I'm just encouraged to hear that it's there because it seems like it might be a later, like I'm worried that it might be a later thing. Like,
it
we'll deal with
wasn't
that
for a
later.
long time.
Okay,
it's been building up slowly as like it starts to kind of take root, but it's still, I would love it if it was more available, but it's not. You have to know where to look, or you have to know somebody who knows where to show you the way.
For it to become part of the culture so it doesn't feel like you have to sort of...
We're going to have an entire generation that is going to have PTSD, civilian and military. So they're going to have an overwhelmed system at some point.
And maybe this is, if telemedicine is something that's available in the Ukraine, like that could be an advocacy avenue for those of us here that are trained in treating patients with PTSD and complex PTSD, that a way in which Americans could help.
Sure. And that also has to be something that I think that would be like a government to government level. And we do have really excellent trained therapists in Ukraine that are doing great jobs, and they're also offering telemedicine as well. For those of us who are deployed that can't make an in-person session, they're doing video sessions for us. Like it is, there's also, there's a couple of really great organizations out there that are working with their EMS, which is, they also are responding to the civilian bombings. And by the way, Russia does this really like fantastically awful thing called a double tap. So they wait for EMS to get there, everyone to start doing rescue operations, and they hit the building again with another rocket. So you've got all of that stress. You're showing up as an EMS worker, not knowing if you're going to go home that night. So there's a few organizations now. One of them is Brave Minds, great psychiatrists and therapists that are working with them to work with the EMS section. So that is being paid attention to. And then we have military therapists as well that are coming in that when they can. And like also, again, this is not as widespread. We have 1,000 kilometers of front line. That's a lot of soldiers. So like
Nobody in this room knows what a kilometer is.
Oh, right. 500 miles?
There you go. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry, freedom units. I forgot. I've been living in Europe too long.
Stupid Americans, we don't know.
Well, would you walk 500 miles? Okay.
Yeah, please, go ahead. And then, Kim, I saw you too.
I'm curious. You were going down a path where you were volunteering with the not-for-profit, I think, with Blue Yellow.
Blue Yellow, yeah.
And then there's a catalyst. Something must have shifted, and you decided to step away from that and really go deep into the medical side of things. What made you stop doing that good work to do this other big work?
So in Ukraine, there's a shortage of combat medics. And for me, I'm always the kind of volunteer that will jump right into something and say, okay, there's a gap to fill. And if I didn't immediately fall in love with medicine, I probably wouldn't have stayed in it. But you really have to love medicine to do this job, and I do. And that it took me by surprise, to be honest, because I was just like, I thought I would try this training and be like, we'll see how it goes. And then somehow it just took off, and I discovered by surprise that I'm actually pretty good at medicine. And I was sitting there going, man, I really sucked at science. How did that happen? So like 1 + 1 is 7. But it worked out, and I love it. I eat, sleep, and breathe medicine, especially tactical medicine. And like I said, in Ukraine, we have to have more advanced training that goes beyond our scope because we don't have enough medical professionals to go around. So like I have way more advanced training than I would as a normal combat corpsman, say in the US military. And that's out of necessity. The whole mantra of this war for Ukraine is adapt, improvise, and overcome. Like there's no other way when you live in a resource constrained situation. So it just kind of happened. Did I do it the hard way? Yes, but I do everything the hard way. So that's my mom loved me growing up because she's like, you just have to do everything the hard way, don't you? And it's still true 38 years later. So I mean, some things never change. So thanks, Mom.
We agree.
She is.
Thanks, Mom. We're all thanking Mom. Thank you, Mom, for giving us Rima. Kim McGregor.
I think so. Granddaughter, sorry, I should be very clear. It's 2 more generations after that. But essentially, World War II brought in the Soviet occupation of the Baltic states. So I'm from Lithuania, so Lithuania was occupied. Before that occupation, my great-grandfather, my great-uncle, they were both military surgeons. They also were doctors and helped everybody. So they would give medical care out for free to the village people and stuff like that. So I guess maybe it's genetic in a way, and just kind of comes naturally. But so part of my family was sent to Siberia, part of my family was executed, and the part that managed to escape is the part that came to the United States after being in the displaced persons camp for 5 years. So our family has been through a lot generationally, so generational trauma, and in addition to also just having a family tradition of helping other people is why that's important to our family and why it kind of descended downwards throughout the generations. We all do this. It's something we just give back automatically, and I just never, like, that's how I was raised. From the young age, we started doing it that way, and then we just never stopped. It just keeps increasing in range, I guess, which is why I always encourage people to volunteer as much as they can, because it matters. Doesn't matter how you do it. Like I said, it all looks different for everybody, you know, but giving back to the community, it may not feel like much, but it does have an impact. A drop in the bucket still eventually fills it. So it might take a lot of time, but it still fills the bucket. Yep.
Go ahead, please. That's a great question.
Great question. So it
I'm
depends.
the journalist.
It depends on where I am. So if I am at the stabilization point, then our shift starts at night because drone cover is less at night. So we will work from, I call it witching hour. Witching hour starts from like 11 and we can work all the way till 8 o'clock in the morning, depending. We could either have 1 casualty or we could have 20 shoved into our stabilization point, depending on how much, you know, they can be extracted. That was then. At the military hospital, I work 48 hours on, 40 off. We start at 6 o'clock in the morning, we end at midnight. So our post-op patients need meds administration 3 times a day. So we are preparing anywhere from 3 to 8 bottles of fluids and medications per surgical patient, and they need that 3 times a day. We're also resetting IVs. If their IV catheter is backed up, we have to put in a new one. So all day up and down the floor of the hospital between, 20 rooms, so that could be a typical day. Medevac shift, we are on standby for 24 hours waiting to get the radio signal to go pick up a casualty. So it's a lot of hurry up and wait. But when we do get the signal, we are then rolled onto our pickup point and we wait for our casualty to be dropped off. And we're always watching for drone cover. So you're on hypervigilant, high alert the entire time. Typical day. On my days off, which I don't have like that many, when we're off shift, I'm just sleeping. I literally just like go into my cave, go lay down on my cot, and I don't move for like 10 hours. So
I'm embarrassed to ask this, and then Dr. Groll might know that, but would you say 48 hours? You literally, like, you get a nap in there somewhere? Like, you really?
You get a couple hours.
Okay.
Yeah, between...
Because there's not enough coffee in the world. And you're not
No,
going to be
there is
effective,
not.
right, 48 hours straight. Okay, so you do get a little bit of...
So
yeah.
between midnight and 6 a.m., and that if we end at midnight, we get to sleep a couple hours.
bit. Okay.
So that's on
Okay.
shift. Off shift, I'm just like,
course.
please don't call me unless we're actually on fire.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's good. Anybody else have any questions? Dr. Malas?
Yes.
Are there other dimensions that maybe people wouldn't think of, like the ethical challenges of serving in the context of, of an active ward on the medical side?
To an extent, it's for me, I'm on my level, not so much. I think for the surgeons and for our anesthesiologists in the higher levels, they have to make very, very important decisions. However, we do have situations in which my students, when I teach them, you can't save everybody. And at that point, you have to also make a decision. And that decision is entirely situational as to, are those battlefield injuries incompatible with life? That can bring an ethical question. If you don't have enough resources, who do you save? So we have these conversations with our students. I've had these conversations with myself. Like but then you have to remember what's going to happen in the moment. So the split second in the moment decision is very hard. We have amputees that come into our stabilization point. The surgeons have to make a decision. Can we save the arm or leg, or can't we? That's one of those situations that also brings up an ethical dilemma, because that's going to change somebody's life, right? Depending on where the amputation is, how high or how low, that dictates their quality of life after that. There's tons of ethical questions. But in the moment, and if we're resource constrained, that is between you and whatever God you believe in terms of how you make that decision.
I have a
There's one
follow-up
back.
question.
Sorry, there's one back
sorry,
there.
Sorry.
Soon. Yeah, soon.
And just on that topic, is it safe to fly in? Like, in other words, I would
No.
imagine, right? I mean,
No.
that's got to be just. It seems like a routine thing. Well, I'm going back, but flying back into a war zone, that's not a. I
We
mean, it's
have
not
no
like there's-
airspace. Our airspace
Right.
has been closed for 4 years.
So where do you fly? Like, maybe you don't want
Poland.
to tell us technically. You fly into Poland and then
Yeah,
get there.
it
Okay.
depends on where you're going, but
Okay.
like the most common answer is Poland.
Okay.
There's, obviously there's several different border
Sure.
crossings you can take, but you have to either take the train or drive in.
Got it.
There's,
Understood.
There's
That's-
no flying option.
I'm glad
It
you
takes
asked that
24
first.
hours to enter and leave the country, usually. Yep.
Go ahead, Mary.
Follow-up question to Dr. Hamalis's query on ethics. With our students, in medicine, there's some form of oath that they will take. In your compressed curriculum, and for the sake of conversation, is there a standard of character or an oath that the combat medics take?
Not officially, but obviously do no harm, life over limb, okay? And that, understanding that you cannot save everybody, but you do everything you can to try. You can't not try.
How's pain management?
Pain management, it depends on the resources that we have. We do as much as we can to take the edge off, but even clinical studies show the faster you start managing pain, the better their clinical outcomes are in the long run. So we try on the onset immediately to do two things: antibiotic administration and then pain meds, because both of those will guarantee at least marginally better or high percentages of better clinical outcomes in the long run. Because emotionally, pain is extremely difficult on the body, physically and emotionally. So we want to make sure we manage their pain as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
Opioids?
Depends on their injuries. So
You know where I'm going with this, because sometimes veterans come back and we know that there's been addiction issues as a result of the need for their, and I'm sure that's another ethical question, right? It's like we want to manage pain, but we also don't want to set up long-term.
Right.
So how does?
And so first of all, I don't use on my patients fentanyl at all, because we have a lot of issues with traumatic brain injury, and fentanyl depresses the respiratory drive. So I don't even carry it. And most of us do not, because ketamine is the safer answer. And so we use ketamine to manage pain. Other things like nefapam as well, which is another stronger pain med, but it's not, as far as I know, we're not using anything like that would create addicts in the future. And this is just in my section of immediate point of injury or post-injury care. And that's After that, when they go to their subsequent hospitals and their, follow-up appointments, that's on their doctors. But as far for me and my standard of care, I am not using opioids because we already have an issue with traumatic brain injury, and so that already takes it off my list. I don't want to use it for my patients. It's also harder to control dosages as well. So for me, I just go with the safer bet, which is ketamine.
Other questions? Please.
This one. This is our designation for being part of the Defense Intelligence section of the Ukrainian Army. My other one is my unit patch for the Black Cats Medical Unit of the Foreign Legion. That's our unit.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. Yep.
Like a gang.
It's kind of cool. We got a lot of fun unit names out there. So there's Snake Team. We're Black Cats. There's also
motorcycle
Med
gang.
Team Alpha,
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead, Mary.
Rima, can I ask your mom a question?
sure. I shouldn't speak for my mother.
Let's ask.
Sorry. You can answer that. You can say no.
You can say no.
As Rima's mom, how do you cope knowing that your daughter is abroad and under really tough situation? How do you stay strong?
Go ahead. Yes, please. I co-sign that. It's okay.
But I just wanted to say I taught public school 35 years in Ohio, had 8th grade history. I thought I was doing pretty good. I thought my service was something. No, I am in awe of what you do. In fact, it's very emotional because I know working with people just by itself is a skill that not everybody has. And everything you said made sense about me in the classroom. In fact, I have a habit of and every speaker says you were shaking your head the whole time. So I resonate with what you do, and I am in awe. I want to thank you. And now I know somebody that did a little more than I did.
But you did a lot. But you did a lot too. And I would say I think that this is an interesting. I know you, Rima, for a long time, and I think that you would stop short of saying that you're exceptional, where most of us in this room believe that you are. And I think it is tricky because what you would say is everybody will find I think you would say everybody will find their way to contribute. Everybody will find their way to make the world better. It doesn't look the same for everybody. But for those of us sitting in the room, I think we'd say we wouldn't, anytime there's a news story about somebody who pulls somebody out of a burning building, they usually say something like, "You would have done the same thing." And we're sitting on a couch going, I don't think I would have. I don't think I would have. I think I would have called the fire department and but you do. You run in when other people run out. So I won't ask you to respond to that, although you're welcome to if you want. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but there is something, there is something inherently unique about you. On the other hand, we want to encourage people to find their place to contribute, right? Yeah.
I think about it this way: at the root of everything is love. How much do you love your fellow man? How far are you willing to go? And that is determined by your own self. And that, again, looks different for everyone. But at the root of it all is love. And so think about that. Like, how much do you love your neighbor? How much do you love the person that is on the street that is looking for a meal, right? Like, it's small stuff like that. It started when I used to give away my lunch in elementary school and to the kids that didn't have any, and I'd come home and Mom would be like, "Why are you not eating your lunch?" I'm like, "Because I'll have food when I get home," and maybe that kid wouldn't. So, like, how much do you love your fellow man? And that's how it is.
There's no way there's a better stopping point than that. Please thank Rima with me. And I will say, for those in the audience and also who are watching on YouTube, please use the QR code to donate if you can. Rima will use that money for supplies and to advance the cause. And so if you're comfortable doing that on your program or on the screen, and we'll make sure that link is also available in the show notes. So thanks everybody. Thank you.